Hello everyone. As you may have read on social media or in our mailing, unfortunately we had to cancel our conference in Amsterdam where Yoko Duron would be speaking as well. Luckily, we were able to find a new date and to have Yoko Duron also in September at our conference in Amsterdam.
24th, right?
24th,
Yeah.
right. And he was very eager to have a short interview, and I think given his recent book on the transformation that we are currently facing and the, I would assume, acceleration that we're facing today with the unfortunate news of Corona, it was a perfect opportunity to have a brief chat with him on what's going on around us and how banks should be tackling these issues.
Yes.
He is a pioneer in internet digitalization, and he has been following up the internet already since 1994. That was when I was 10 years old.
I'm old.
Now, how would you evaluate the efforts of banks related to digitization? Are they doing a good job today?
I think most banks do realize that the essence of what they are, what they do is changing. And I think this is recent.
Mm-hmm.
This is for the last, this is something we have been seeing for the last maybe 2, 3, 4, 5 years,
Right.
at the most.
Mm-hmm.
And before that, so I'm in the business for 25 years. What banks did was they made their business more digital.
Yeah.
They did not consider the possibility of the fact that the essence of their business could change.
Mm-hmm.
And with the changes that they have faced over the last couple of years with fintech and the big tech providing payment solutions or loans or all these kind of things that, we know it's a reality now. So they know that digital is not just there to make them more efficient, it can also allow others to create new business models, new business logic, for which the traditional incumbent banks not necessarily have the proper answer or had the proper answer.
Right.
That being said, it's not because they know it that they are able to act upon that.
Yeah.
I'm afraid that most banks are still, in their vision and strategy, probably they have seen the light. In their execution, most of them are still old school traditional banks.
Yeah. So would you agree that if I say that banks that are currently looking to go digital,
Mm-hmm.
they missed the essence of going digital because, digitization it's just a means to an end.
Yeah.
And what does it help if you're looking at the right means if you don't know where you're heading towards?
Yeah. Well, I think it's all a matter of perspective. And one of the images that I've started to use, a question that I ask a company is, what kind of a company are you? Are you a ground floor company? Are you a third floor company? Or are you a fifth floor company? And with that I mean is, traditionally, companies looked at their landscape and competitors from a ground floor perspective. I
Mm-hmm.
saw you, you saw me, I saw what you did, so I copied you, and
Yep.
you were my competitor, and you frightened me, and I
Which
answered
is
to
in
that.
most cases still.
Which is for most retailers and banks and others still the case.
Yeah.
So if one retailer does something with store decoration, the others will copy. If one bank starts to introduce financial service or PSD2 solution, others will copy.
Mm-hmm.
That's ground floor.
Yeah.
This has helped us for decades, even for centuries, to steer and to define course and steer in an industry. But for the last decade or so, the digital players came along.
Yeah.
And in order to see what Amazon or Apple or the fintechs or the others were doing, you had to raise your perspective. So it was not enough to just see your other banks.
Mm-hmm.
You had to step up a bit higher and say, well, that's interesting. Amazon is giving loans to their merchants. What would that mean for us? Is that going to impact us? Apple and the others are providing solutions for payments. That was that.
And what does it mean for them? Because it's not just we're losing revenues, it's also where are they seeing the low-hanging fruit and how
Yeah,
can
and
we
why
anticipate on that?
do they do that? Because
Yeah.
in a lot of cases, like for instance, Amazon, most of the money from Amazon is not coming from their retail activities. While they are messing up the entire retail landscape, it's coming from all other different kind of revenue streams, like data monetization, advertising, the cloud, everything they have. So the same here. It is. I mean, what is the impact on us? But also, why are they doing that? For instance, if as Amazon you give loans to your merchants, the kind of insights they give. This gives you as a platform player that allows merchants to sell. It's incredible.
Yeah.
So basically you could give the loans for free because you don't need it, the money from the loans. What you need is the insights from how the merchants function, for instance. So that's
and the
interesting to
service.
realize.
And that's, I would argue, probably one of the few contexts where you can, without any guilt, talk about ecosystem thinking. Because what Amazon's doing is not just creating revenues out of merchants, but also making these merchants bigger
Yeah.
to help Amazon on the long term as well.
Yeah. Well, yeah, but eventually it's all about Amazon, of course.
Yeah.
But they can't do that without the others. So indeed, it is an ecosystem that functions, like the Apple ecosystem and some others. But these are you only have a very limited list of real-world ecosystems that actually generate a lot of money.
Yeah.
So that was the third floor perspective. You see the digital players, but the fifth floor is that you, even if you raise your perspective even more, you start to see how society is changing.
Yeah.
And then you see, then you see things like, imagine that in a decade from now, a lot of the cars are no longer in personal ownership or in leasing formula, but I mean on an individual level, apparently owned by a person, but are part of fleets, operators that provide mobility solutions. But for banks, for instance, this will entirely change the game of a retail bank, for which one of the three components of their existence is giving loans and insurance for cars.
Now you're answering already my last question.
Well, sorry for that. But I mean, it's all. I want to just to illustrate that. I mean, it's no longer enough to look at what your peer banks are doing. I mean, we still do that. That's fine. You have to do that. You add the digital dimension, but that's just copying digital things, and also seeing that Amazon is maybe providing new business models, that they do things for different reasons.
Yeah.
And yet, even that is not enough. If you raise your perspective a little bit more, then you see that society is changing, and that your transformation is more than just becoming digital. And that digital is an instrument or to speed up your competitors or to help you establish your transformation.
Right.
And that is what most banks do not do.
And that brings us
To the book.
to the book.
English version since, well, 2 weeks. It's brand new, it still smells.
And nominated as Management Book of the Year in the Netherlands.
Yes, absolutely. Well, actually 49 other books all are nominated, so but I'm still very proud.
It talks about the metastorm in society that's currently changing the way we need to think about mobility, living, work, and well, in today's context, it seems pretty actual
relevant
things. Yeah, absolutely, and quite visionary. Could you briefly explain maybe a little bit what this metastorm is all about?
Yeah. The concept of the metastorm is the fact that currently, as we speak, we are facing huge changes in society that most people, I mean, they know it's happening because they feel some signs in their personal life, or for some elements that, I mean, we talk about it in the media, but what we don't do is connect them. And so the perfect storms are work is changing, so the future of work, and that has to do with the emergence of artificial intelligence, a lot of other things that are happening, more flexible jobs. So there are a lot of things happening right now, and that will impact in the next 5 to 10 years what work is about.
Right.
The second thing is the physical space where everything happens. For the last 75 years after the Second World War in the West, we have created a model of what I call in the book linear living, meaning that we don't live where we work, or we don't work where we live, and our kids go to school in yet another place, and our shopping is yet in another location. Why? Because the best schools were, well, over there, and the best living is over here, and the best retailers are there, and my job is yet somewhere else. But that was fine because we had cars, and we had mobility, and we had everything that facilitated us to do the best things in the best places, and then just connect it with cars. But now we see in society that this is coming to a standstill. People are saying, well, we can't continue like that. It's a disaster for climate, for our sustainability objectives, the way we live, and so on and so on. So both this AI thing and work and flexibility puts stress on society. It stresses us. What will be the future? We don't know. Well, the same applies to the physical space. Do we have to change? Do we have to stop building houses everywhere? And do we have to concentrate, regroup people in city centers? Again, this creates a lot of questions, a lot of negativity, a lot of stress. And then the last one that everyone can already experience in their personal lives is mobility.
Yeah.
We are stuck in traffic every day. We can't get into city centers anymore with diesel cars and so on and so on. So this is something that people literally feel today. And yet again, in the next decade or so, this model will tilt. Now, if you just look at work, that's a lot of hassle and a lot of challenges, headache. If you look at where do we have to organize ourselves, again, headache.
Yeah.
Mobility is killing us and we have to rebuild the model, headache. But if you connect them to each other, you see that they are intertwined. You see that if people, and you have a group of new entrants in the employer market, they say, well, I'm not going to commute every day. I don't want a car for that. I want a job close to where I live.
Yeah.
And through technology and with their mindset and with the culture change for corporates, for instance, that allow that, it for the first time it becomes possible. And then you see that cities, for instance, they are organizing work-living combinations in a way that you can live in a very fancy neighborhood or in a very cool neighborhood, and you do no longer need a car or something else to facilitate for like in Paris, it was announced last week or 2 weeks ago that one of their objectives is that everyone in Paris should be able to do everything they want in their lives in 15 minutes by car, by bike or by foot or whatever, in e-scooter or whatever.
Wow.
So that's their objective.
Yeah.
So this philosophy, actually, instead of only seeing the headaches, you can see the opportunities.
Yeah.
And you see that if a group of people no longer needs a car because they can work where they live, you are starting to solve the mobility problem, because you have to ban cars from city centers for the livability, but you don't have to ban them because people don't buy them in the first place anymore, because they buy an apartment somewhere where they can also work in the neighborhood. So it's all interconnected. And once you start seeing that, you get like an optimistic worldview instead of something like oh my God, everything is changing. It was already difficult with the digital transformation, and now this is coming on top of that. So it's all part of the same solution.
Now, with Corona, all that seems to be stressed in just a few weeks. Do you see that this whole evolution will be accelerating the whole process?
I think so.
Would you review your 2030?
Review as
in 2030 we're going to have
chapter
this
in the
bright
book, you mean?
future?
Yeah.
Will it be sooner?
No, it
Or
will not
will
be
it be-
sooner, because in the book I describe this future
Yeah.
in a decade from now. Why? Because this is close enough
Yeah.
for us to believe in it. It's still far enough
evolve.
to give us some time. But a lot of things that I describe in the book will not happen in 2030. They will happen in 2023, and others will happen in 2040. You don't know, but it's a pattern. So, but what I do believe is that we are showing to the world now how vulnerable we are in this global ecosystem, in this global model of independence, or dependencies between everything, and also how weak we are, that we cannot survive in a smaller community. Today we got the news that Italy is now in complete lockdown. The entire country is in complete lockdown.
Yeah.
Well, 50 years ago, this country could have provided everything for themselves. Today they can't anymore.
Yeah.
In this philosophy of the world is round, it is actually finding this middle ground between still staying global citizens, connecting to everything that we have available in the world, but doing more things locally. It's not just about I can work where I live, but we see technology that provides us for food production nearby the consumption. We see production of stuff. 3D manufacturing, robotics allows us within a decade to create a lot of the things that we now have in a mass production model somewhere far away in the Far East in China. We can locally produce it at a fair cost with sustainability objectives. So my vision is that what Corona is showing us now, and if we adapt to it properly in the next 6 to 12 months, this will also help us in achieving the sustainability goals, which will put similar pressure on us, but on the longer term. So today we are like in an instant crisis, but everything we need to change, we would have to change anyway in the next decade because of sustainability and SDG
Aside
purposes.
from sustainability, now you also have a political factor, because we are confronted with the fact that we are too dependent of the Chinese economy.
Yeah, which is a geopolitic situation,
Because in
absolutely.
your book you talk about the cost that gets lowered due to automation, you talk about sustainability, and those are very valuable arguments. But today we also see that we need to relocalize certain elements to
Absolutely.
get less dependent of. So the whole global economy, I see a lot of, it brought us a lot of opportunities, a lot of wealth, but now we're also faced with the
Yeah. But it's
negative
always,
effects
I mean, there's always
to
a
some
pendulum,
extent.
and the
Yeah, of
pendulum, I
course.
mean, it last 30 years went entirely in the direction of globalization. So now we have to go back, but we can't go back to completely to nationalized
No.
solutions. And I'm not, because I deliberately did not write about these kind of things because I do not want people to hijack this book for political purposes.
Yeah.
That's not my objective.
Mm.
The reality has to be, the future has to be somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
I mean, being global as human beings, as enterprises, as investors, but still being local in our ability to execute, in our abilities to be human beings and to create local ecosystems and local economies, but without going back to a century ago,
Yeah,
which
of
would be a
course.
very, very, very bad thing if that would happen. If Corona would actually push us back into small communities without connection to the outside world, I mean, that would go maybe going back to the Middle Ages.
Yeah,
We should
yeah.
avoid that at
Of
all
course.
cost.
Now, a few months before we had Corona, we had the great news that Europe is investing in the Green Deal.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see that as the starting point of Europe becoming a global player again with a unique competitive advantage to position itself in the global economy? Or do we need more to realize that?
We need absolutely more to realize that. I mean, it's not because Europe announces what is it? It's a lot of billions. It's a trillion. I think it's $1 trillion project. I mean, that's good, and if they have the money, that's fine. We need it, but we need actually the mentality on all levels. And what I describe in the book is that a lot of the changes on the level of how we organize ourselves, I mean, local economy, local different forms of living and work combinations and mobility is something in which local governments have a lot of power. We need the insights and we need the strategy on a corporate level. So companies have to buy into the model. Citizens, employees have to buy into the model. So there's much more to be done than just a Green Deal.
Yeah.
But of course, the Green Deal already is such a powerful instrument. What we see now is that most of our large corporate customers, they all say, well, there's something new on the horizon. It's the SDGs. We need these sustainable elements as part of our operations, as part of our future thinking, of our business model design. So that's also an element.
Yeah.
Just Europe waving with a lot of billions, that's fine, but not enough. It really needs to become real. Part of people, organizations, society, governments. So it has to be supported by everyone in the game.
Right, including banks, of course.
Absolutely,
And that
because
would be
banks
my last
are
question.
the backbones of society from a financial perspective.
Yeah, because you in your book at the end you talked about a future for banks 2030 and their role in the whole platform process. I hope that's not the only way that banks can play a role, because you saw them more as an investor in the platforms rather than, well, that was just one of the suggestions, of course.
But in the
because
book
that
I
would
keep it
mean-
limited because I have to describe some scenarios. You can't describe it all. And so what
Gives
I
me room for blog writing.
Absolutely, because this is now exactly the challenge that banks are facing. Can you try to invent for yourself this future vision and a role for yourself in that future? So what I describe is if people live differently and there's more like cooperative models. I'm not speaking about co-housing and stuff. I mean, that's fine if you want to do that, but I mean that even in the housing market, you don't necessarily have a one-on-one relationship with ownership. So I've invested in something and I own it. I can invest in shares in a platform that owns houses. So I own not my house I live in, but I own shares in this platform operator that actually is running all of these houses, is maintaining them. So that's what I described to get the same with mobility platforms, and so on and so on.
Yeah.
And if that would happen, it would have a serious impact on retail banks, because they give loans for houses and cars, they insure houses and cars. So if that would fall away, but of course a bank is more than a retail bank. Of course, a lot of local banks are mainly retail banks and have other activities at the side.
I'll be more concerned about loans than insurance. Insurance will always be required. Even in the renting business, you need insurance.
Yeah, but probably that's like insuring, it's no longer insuring on a one-to-one level. So meaning that the entire channel approach for people selling it's becoming it's more complex at the one side. It's absolutely B2B. And it's more riskful. So I mean, if you have a 7-year contract to insure something, I mean, the national railroads just saying something. This is a huge contract. I don't know who insures that. This is not a B2C player. If you win it, I mean, for a decade you're safe. If you lose it, I mean, while selling 1 million insurances to individual travelers or people with an individual car, I mean, if some people got or dropped the contract, well, you still have all the others. So in a B2B world, it's a different business game. But of course, a bank is more than that. And what banks should look at is all of the opportunities. Because, I mean, let's take Tesla. Tesla said, from the moment our cars become self-driving, we will no longer sell them. We will be the owner of the cars, and we will have a fleet. We will be the operator of the cars. The thing is that the amount of hundreds of billions they would need to keep all of these cars in their own portfolio, they don't have that kind of money. So the only way Uber or Tesla or Waymo or whoever wants to operate a car fleet tomorrow, the only way to do that is to find a partner that can, I mean, if these cars will be in operation for 5 years, they need to be financed for 5 years. Today, individuals take the loan. Tomorrow, the platform needs to do that. Is this just going to be a relationship between a platform operator and a bank, or will the bank be part of the platform? Will they invest in housing platforms themselves? Be part? Will they create these platforms? Will they create these mobility platforms? Because, I mean, today, if a construction company builds a site with 500 apartments, they want to sell it. If they want to keep it for 50 years and operate it and make more profit on the long term, sustainable profit on the long term, they need to finance this for 50 years. So the entire financing game will change, and that is a B2B thing. So there are a lot of opportunities, and this is just one dimension. So once you start diving into what that future could be, think health, think longevity and longer living, and so on, there are so many opportunities. But these are completely new business models. It's not just making your bank digital.
No. But yeah, that all those discussions, etc., are also the reason why I asked you to speak at the banking scene now. So,
and I'm looking forward to that in September.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And see you then.
Absolutely. Thanks.
All right.